please take a seat there. And we have also asked Thomas Novak to join us here on stage for this session. And we would like now to discuss, I'm so far away here, to discuss the replicability. Thank you. I think that was brilliant. I mean, what we did in Sweden is one thing. What is applicable for other countries? It's another thing. But Thomas, what is your reflection when you hear both Caroline and Carlos here and also Bengt about the training capacity and how important it is?
I think we can answer that very shortly. The technology is completely replicable. It is available. It can be used across Europe, independent of climate zone and building tradition. It's a bit more difficult here and there, but it can be done. Training can be replicated likewise. It just needs an effort. It needs an effort maybe of governments to install the respective schemes. And Bengt has hinted at that. It has been a constant, really battle to get governments to make it mandatory, and the industry has also fought back quite a bit against making training mandatory. What I think is the biggest aspect that needs to be replicated is the electricity price versus gas ratio. And I've mentioned that, but it's really the thing where the countries differ the most, and that has also the biggest impact when it comes to end users wanting to invest in a heat pump and maybe even paying more today. And I'm quite convinced that there is not an option to finance this whole heat transition with government subsidies. And so if governments want this heat transition to happen, they need to look at Sweden and some other countries where this price ratio is favorable, and that activates end users.
So as long as it's cheaper to buy gas, people will buy. Is it as easy
There
as
is
that?
a tendency that they will do that. Because if you are strained with resources, why should you feel responsible for the whole climate change debate? If other people, you will always compare your neighbor that you mentioned that you don't have.
Of course not.
You will always compare that to your neighbor and say, but my neighbor went to Crete for holidays and I should invest so much money and not go on holidays for the climate, and I don't feel it anyways. I live in Sweden on this island and it's cold.
I know.
You have the arguments like that.
We have. We also have cultural differences, I suppose. But I don't know if that is really important in this case, because we are all people and we work about the same way. But in some way or another, I get the feeling that in Sweden we've been very, very sort of organized, careful. We've done this by the book in a way that maybe it works for us, but does it with our friends in other countries to really do it that way? They might find other ways. What do you think, Caroline, about the national differences here?
Yeah, of course we have. Of course we have differences how we do it. But I agree to Thomas that it was a good business to invest in a heat pump those days when we did so. But then we also have another good thing in Sweden. We have rather well-insulated buildings, and that is because they're built for cold climates, and we have a way of heating where we heat the whole day. We don't actually save, even if we would put out the heat in daytime. When we are at work, we don't save that much. So therefore, we have our houses are well equipped for heat pumps. We in other countries, less insulated houses. There you can, since they're less insulated, you also earn a lot if you switch out of the heating system when you leave the house, and then you work with this burst heating when you come home.
Yes.
And that is more challenging for a heat pump. So in those cases, it's important to combine. But I also need to say that very many heat pumps in Sweden have been installed in existing buildings. Very many in buildings built during the 40s.
Oh, yes.
So that is to say that
My
heat pumps can only be used in new buildings is wrong. They work perfectly well in new buildings, but also
They do.
existing. But sometimes it's better to do some insulation before you, and sometimes not.
It's always good, isn't it? But let's hear from you guys from the other countries here now. Do you agree with the reasons that we were just discussing? What could be replicable or not? And what can we learn from each other here? Maybe there are other schemes also and other ideas from other countries.
I mean, if there's no other question, there is this one-stop shop that
Yes.
Ireland has really introduced, and Kieran knows it very well. It's really something that every member state should copy.
Because
my
it's very
opinion.
easy.
It's very easy, and
Can you
I
tell
would
us
say
about it,
the
so
one-stop shop gives a full line of support from assessment of the technology, assessment of the house, assessment of the technology, assessment of offers, and even assessment of quality. So it's basically your single contact when you want to install a heat pump. It takes away uneasiness and fear of wrong decisions from end users. And that's why it's so important. I would advise every government, if you have the choice between investment support or setting up one-stop shops in every city of more than 50,000, I'm just picking that number, but 50,000 inhabitants, do the latter. Help the customers to take a trusted decision in a quality and reliable solution. And maybe this, what you mentioned, Carlos, this idea of the customer complaints board, that could even be connected to that. So that you really, if you decide as an end consumer to invest 20, 30,000 euros, then you can trust it will deliver. And if the electricity price is then adjusted, you will save over time. So it really becomes an investment and not only a cost. And then the story is playing out much nicer. And then we will have your neighbor and my neighbor and everybody else's neighbor agree that an electrified building is a better building. So we have a better future with heat pumps.
I agree, and also with such a one-stop shop, we can also use the digital tools to actually visualize. I was impressed by the ideas of the wisdom here, how to visualize data, how to make them full of value for me and my neighbor, and we can compare, you know, and we can also the installers can compete to have us as customers in such a way, if everything is transparent. So we need the digitalization to work with us here. Carlos, what do you say when it comes to different countries and questions you get about that and so on?
Well, yeah, of course the situation is different, and I think that the biggest problem will be in countries that have a quite a mild climate, because then, of course, you don't get your investment in return. So I think that will be where we'll have more problems, and that may do that to use the eco-design requirements for setting a ban on fossil fuels driven boilers may be a problem. But it's not insurmountable. I think that it's possible to use other types of heat pumps as well. When it comes
and cooling.
Yes, and cooling, and then you have the reversible heat pumps. And I think that if you go for battery insulation, and I think that the EPBD will always, so steadily we get better buildings. So I think that we are exaggerating the problem of, because this is, we speak a lot about the problems with heat pumps, that the emitters use a too high temperature, and then you lose in efficiency. So first, we have in the labeling already that information, how the heat pump performs in the high temperature system. In the label, it's just low temperature and middle average temperature, or medium temperature, but there will be also the indication if it functions and how it functions with high temperature. And I think that as we renovate buildings and improve the buildings that the EPBD will oblige us to, then there will be less and less of those high temperature systems. So there is a huge possibility to increase the use of heat pumps, and in urban areas, if there are district heating that is installed, then heat pump will have also there a role. District heating is a very
combine the
combine both, and district heating is actually a very it's a very efficient, very practical in urban areas, because then you don't have the noise, you don't have the outdoor units and so on. And the district heating will, in some way, there will be heat pumps providing both heating and cooling, and combined with other sources also of heat. and there will always be a huge need for heat pumps for that. Also, what is called spillvärme, lost heat, or something like that.
Yes,
Waste heat,
spillvärme. And then it becomes also interesting for the industry, as we heard about, using that. But please, now we have 1 minute left, so I would like you to give all we've discussed now, and remember also the training issue that Bengt brought up here. To make this happen now, your best card, what would you see more of like tomorrow, Caroline? What can we do tomorrow?
What can we do tomorrow? I think we, one thing is hard to say, but
I know.
yeah. So to make things that it's tempting, affordable, and reliable for the end user is important.
So
to
the
build
one
consumer trust, but also to rely on technology, but also that it's a good. It's a good way to do it. It's affordable and
so the one-stop shop could be something that you can sign as well.
Yes, of course.
Then you can say test beds. Because he has already said stop shop. So you can say collaboration around test beds.
One more thing I would like to emphasize when it comes to the next thing. Yeah, now that we have the heat pumps, they are reliable and so on. But the next step is to make them smart, to operate smart.
Exactly.
And for that, we need test beds, we need test methods, and we might need some comparative testing. Again, because we don't have the eco design and the labeling and things for that so far.
That is so cool, and we'll come back to that in the last session. Carlos, one thing.
In energy efficiency, it's the amount of things that provide the big results. So I will be tempted to not answer.
Integrate everything.
Yes, it has to be systematic and multiply it.
And it's so
and we have that
intertangled and it's so complex. But I still appreciate that we have got so many good ideas from you on that screen, and the one-stop shop and the new smart testing.
Yeah, smart testing.
Smart testing. One more.
But I give you one,
Okay.
because that's what I think is really super important. Trust that the technology will deliver in residential, commercial, industrial applications and district heating, and then the message is just do it.
Just do it.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Thank you, panel, and thank you, Bengt. And please, you can...